Good morning, everyone, and how are you on this Wednesday morning? I am coming to you live and was thrilled to see how many of you since last week had submitted questions to me to answer during these lives. If you don't know me, I'm Cheryl Gould. I am the founder of Moms of Tweens and Teens. I'm a parent educator, and I love to connect with you here and also in the inner circle and the private community we have. And there are so many ways for you to get the support and encouragement and reassurance you need. And each one of you here matters to me. And so if you have any questions, even during this time, I would love for you to submit them. And if I can't answer them today, I'll come back next Wednesday at 9 a.m. That's the time central that I'm going to be doing these, and I can answer your questions then. So super excited to be able to be with you and that you're here and that I have the space with you where I can answer your questions. So we had 3 questions that I'm going to answer today, and I thought they were very common challenges that parents are facing right now. And so I am sure that so many of you are going to benefit from these moms submitting these questions to me, because when we can share our challenges, when we can share our struggles, we know we're not alone. And just having that reassurance can be so encouraging and can normalize the challenges. Like, we don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm failing as a mom, or what's wrong with my kid, or it's only me, or it's only my kid, because that is why I started. One of the biggest reasons I started Moms of Tweens and Teens is because this can be such a lonely time where when our kids were little and we were in that play group, we could talk about how our kids weren't maybe sleeping through the night, and we're all commiserating and what kind of formula or how are you breastfeeding or whatever it was. We could talk about those things. But with tweens and teens, I have found, talking to so many of you, that there's shame when we struggle and when we face these challenges. And we're afraid that if we share it, then our friend is going to tell their kid or they're going to tell somebody else. And so we keep it inside and we feel really alone and isolated. So here in this place at Moms of Tweens and Teens, I want you to know that you're not alone and that these struggles and challenges that we talk about, so many of us are dealing with it. So I'm going to switch over to the questions, okay? And I am going to use anonymous names. So I've changed the names. And this first question is submitted by Barb. We're going to call her Barb, okay? And she is a mom to 5. Oh my gosh, 5 kids, okay? You ready? 17, 15, 13, 11, and 7. And she says, I quote, "We are riding the struggle bus hard these days, especially with our 15 and 13-year-old. This is a question regarding my 15-year-old son. What to do when you feel you are letting your kids learn from their mistakes, but they don't learn? Who is feeling like that? You have let go of control and you're trying to allow for natural consequences to take over and do the work, right? It's very scary to let go and let those natural consequences fall into place. And then Barb's saying, and then here I have these natural, I'm allowing them to fall into place, and it's not working. They're not learning. So this is what I'm going to go on and quote. He wasn't getting his homework done, so he missed playing with his varsity football team. Ugh, painful, right? I thought for sure this would be a motivation to get things done, but it's just a repeating cycle of him saying he is doing this work, but he's not. We talked to him about it and he says, I'll do it, I'll do it. And it's a power struggle just to talk to him every time we check his grades and say, hey, you're not doing it. to the point he has to reduce some of his past grades in school this coming year. Question: how can I get him to actually do the work instead of just saying he is? I feel like it's a thing that I have to sit right next to him and make sure he's doing it, but that makes him mad too. Any suggestions? Well, Barb, thanks for submitting this question. And I just want to say to you that are listening, who can relate to this? Who here is relating? That you keep on trying to support your kid and you're trying to help them and you're coming alongside of them and you're trying to stay on them because that feels like the responsible thing. And then here you're like, okay, it's not working. I'm going to let the chips fall. And then something that your kid just loves, like varsity football, which we had corresponded back and forth, and she said he loves football. And so not playing football has been really depressing to him. And so what happens, and I certainly relate to this, and I can share a couple of articles that my daughter actually wrote that she talks about when she was in high school and she was going through similar things to Barb's son and how she felt. And so for me, it was like this constant wanting to keep their head above water. And then if I let them sink, then I would see her feeling depressed. And so I was trying really hard to keep her head above water. So I share that to just let you know I've been there. And so from experience in my own life, parenting my kids, and also working with hundreds of moms, what works, and parents, what have I found works and what hasn't worked? And also talking to kids and talking to my kids about what I did that worked and didn't work. So the truth is, Barb, you can't actually make him do his work. You can't. That's a tough thing about having teenagers, right? Because we have limited control. And what we want to do, I talked about last week, is we want to try and control it. We want to support our kids, but what we end up doing is we end up trying to control it, which doesn't work. So what does work? If it doesn't work to try to make them get the work done, what does work? So let me see, I put 6 things that you can do, okay, to support him. And this is for all of you that are in this place. So number 1, remain calm and don't stress out about the grades. Instead, focus on the here and now. So what do I mean by this? And I'm super excited. I am interviewing Michelle Borba. She's very well known. She wrote Selfie. She also just recently released a book called Thrivers. And her whole book is why some kids thrive and why other kids don't, and what to do about it. And I'm interviewing her tomorrow. So I'm planning all for that interview, and I'm reading her book, which I can't recommend enough. But the reason I say that is because what she said research shows, and this isn't even with COVID, is that our kids today are more stressed, are more overwhelmed, and she interviewed hundreds of kids more depressed than they ever have been. And what the findings showed is the more that we're putting the stress and pressure on them and focusing on grades and success, the worse it's making it for our kids. And she talks about it's how to help your kids to shine. It's the last part, I can't remember exactly it's Thrivers, and that says something, and it's not coming to my head right now, but how to make your kids shine. And her whole point in the book, based on research, is that focusing on those things doesn't work. So I just want to interject that, and I will put the interview on when it comes out on this page so that you can listen to it, because I know it's going to be so good. But what I have seen in my own life and see for all of us, I don't know one mom or parent that doesn't struggle with this, or caregiver, is we focus out on the future. So we fortune tell, and then we catastrophize. So if your kid right now is struggling, it's really easy to play that out into the future and end up labeling them. Oh my gosh, my kid, they're never going to be successful. They're lazy, they're unmotivated, they're not going to get good grades to go into that college. And so on and on we go. And what happens? We're fortune telling, we're catastrophizing, and we're not in the here and now with our kid. We're not going to, when we're in that reactive place, focused on what might happen in the future and how it's not going to go the way that we thought it should go, we're not going to support our kid very well. So I would say remain calm. And how you do that is resist the urge to read more into it and more playing out their future given the choices they're making right now. And instead, you want to, number two, be really curious about what your kid, and in this question, what he, her son, might really need now. Okay, so that's what you want to focus on. Kids right now, after quarantine, are at an all-time high stress. They're overwhelmed. I get emails from parents that are saying, my kid is really struggling right now. They're unmotivated, their grades have slipped, they're stressed out, they're in a hole. And this is so common right now with where our kids have been at. And of course, it makes sense. So many of our kids, they've been doing online learning. And so that is really tough. I know if I was back in high school and I was having to do online learning, I'm ADHD. I would not, I would not have done well. I would have been spacing out. I am creative. I need people. Our kids need people. And so much of this, and I didn't ask this mom, but I would say, did this start since the quarantine? Because what we're seeing is that everything is ramped up because of COVID. Our kids are anxious about COVID. And the thing about tweens and teens is they often don't tell us how stressed they are. And they don't feel like we're going to understand. And so we end up getting on them about doing their work and getting their grades up and all of those things versus how are they doing emotionally? How are they doing mentally? Those are the questions that we really need to focus on. So if they're burned out, stressed out, overwhelmed, we need to be asking what might they need. So number three, which I just said, focus on his emotional and mental health. So how do you do this? You want to think, be curious and think, how might I support him? What might he need? And is he hanging out with his friends? Is he hanging out with friends? Is he isolating? Now, a lot of our kids are cocooning in their rooms and they're video gaming and they're on their phones 24/7. And we have to ask ourselves, is that how they're connecting with friends? What part of that is healthy? What part of it isn't healthy? So we want to get curious, but we also want to say, how much has their behavior changed? Am I seeing any changes in behavior? And also what would be supportive, and then what am I doing that's not supportive? Number four, we want to convey, and I'll speak to Barb, convey to him that you're on his side and it's not about his grades. You know what? Let's say his name's Brian. Brian, I'm here to support you and I care about you. And I I don't, it's not all about the grades. It's how I might best support you. Now, what it sounds like is there's what I call inflammation happening. So things are inflamed in the relationship right now. They're trying to focus on his grades, help him to get his grades up. He's saying, leave me alone. And I don't want you involved in that. And you're looking at grades. And so I would ask, and I think it's important for us all to ask, what is causing the inflammation in our relationship? And how can I bring the inflammation down and actually connect more with my kid? Because when we're focusing more on the relationship and how to support our kids, everything is going to get better. And that's across the board. That is no matter what's going on, how can I be more in relationship? And that looks different for each one of you. And depending upon our kid, depending upon where our relationship is at. And so thinking about that, asking yourself, where's the inflammation? What might I be focusing on? There's one mom that I work with, and she was reading all of her daughter's texts. And she realized it was really upsetting her. It was causing so much stress in their relationship. And instead, what she started doing, she stopped reading the texts. I said, stop altogether and see what happens. And all of a sudden, her daughter started talking to her again. Their relationship started getting better. She started focusing more on, okay, this is when you need to check in your phone with me at night. Didn't read the text, but had better limits and boundaries around her daughter's phone versus getting in there and trying to read all the texts, which were just making her more upset and fueling that inflammation in the relationship. So you want to ask, what can I do? Number 5, empower him. That's where we try to jump in there and we're getting in our kids' stuff and we're looking up their grades and we're checking on everything because that feels like what the good parent does, rather than asking. We're telling, we're over monitoring, we're over controlling, we're overly involved, we're over managing everything. Who here is like, oh, it's just so exhausting. And it doesn't work. It actually ends up building resistance and resentment. And while it might have worked when our kids are younger, as they're getting older, they're going to resist us. And actually, it causes the opposite where they don't want to do it because sometimes it's like they won't get off my back. So I'm just not going to care anymore because mom is caring so much. So if you notice you're caring too much, you want to bring that back into balance and think about how can I help my kid to care more. So how do you do that? You ask rather than tell. So you want to say things like, hey, Brian, you know I'm here for you. And I'm just noticing, this is my formula I shared with you last week. I'm just noticing I'm nagging you, I'm bugging you, it doesn't feel good. I care about you. And you're telling me to get off your back. You know what? I don't want to be on your back. I want to support you. So what might feel supportive? And be in the conversation. How can I help you? Do you want my help? Oftentimes we get in there and we help them and we don't even ask them, how can I help you? And what I was talking to Barb, we were messaging back and forth, and now I'm going to lose my train of thought. What I was going to say, but she was just saying how discouraged he's gotten, and I said he's in a hole. So he's so far down, which is how my daughter felt, that it's like he doesn't know how to dig himself out of that hole. So how I just, reflect back what you see. I see you're discouraged. I see that you feel unmotivated, rather than being judgmental and like saying you're unmotivated, you're being lazy, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. We want to come alongside of them and say, hey, I see that you're discouraged. I see you're overwhelmed. I see it's like you're drowning. And that's hard to watch. And yet I know I can't get in there and I can't control it, but what might help you? So you want to empower rather than get in there. And that's by asking really good questions. Number 6, also ask yourself, why might they be struggling? I'm a huge believer that all kids want to do well. They just lack the skills. They don't know how. They need support. And oftentimes we're trying to support them and we're not the best support system for them. So I was asking Barb when we were messaging her, have you had him tested for any learning differences? Is this something that he has struggled with in the past? Now, the studies have shown that the pandemic actually has caused our kids, when they've done studies, it manifests itself like ADHD, where our kids might not have ADHD, but they sure seem like they do because of the online learning. And they're not motivated and they're distracted and all of those things. So we have to take that into consideration. And I also want to say to Barb, you're not in this boat alone. So many kids are. So many kids. I don't know what the statistics are, but I wouldn't be surprised talking to parents if it's 65%, maybe 70, maybe even more. I don't know. But I just know across the board, kids have struggled. And so parents are worried about them going back into school and them being behind. Just know that it's not only your kid, that all the other kids, they're in the same boat. And if they're not, then they're in the minority. Okay. So just calm yourself, know that they're going to get through this and that what they need us to do is to come alongside of them and to be their support system. So, and I say that to be that support system in a different way. And so what I was saying to Barb is, have you considered getting him a tutor? And can you get somebody to come in and help him to dig himself out of the hole? Because what I want to say with Barb is, you sitting next to him, he gets mad. That's not working. So we might be doing it, but it's only creating that wedge in your relationship. So ask Brian, or that's not his real name, but ask Brian, okay, I won't sit next to your mad, but how might I help you? And maybe, come up with a plan with him at a good time. Say, I'm okay, I'll agree, I'll back off. Okay. However, can you show me what you've done? Or you need to get this done before you do XYZ. So you can, if he likes to game, it's like, okay, let's come up with a plan. This is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking you need to have this done. And before you game, you need to work on your homework for 2 hours. See, you're not sitting next to him, but you're attaching it to something, and then you can game. Or maybe it's like, do you need a tutor? Sometimes kids are resistant to getting a tutor, but you can say, just let's try it one time and see how it helps. So those are just some things to think about, okay? So to review it, remain calm, don't stress out about the grades or fortune telling, catastrophize into the future. Focus on the here and now. How can I support this kid? Be curious about what they might really need right now. Number 3, that was number 2. Focus on their emotional and mental health. Kids are really struggling right now. And even doing that, think about, are you having any fun? Is everything just really heavy? And how can you even make things lighter in your home and more fun? Some moms say, I've just stopped caring about grades and focusing more on the relationship and more on having fun. Number 4, convey to him that you're on his side and it's not about the grades, that you care. And then number 5, empower him by asking rather than telling. How might I support you? I don't want to nag. I want to be supportive. What does that look like? And if they say, stop doing this, then listen, even though it's hard. And number 6, get some reinforcements. If they need to be tested for learning differences, if they need a tutor, see what resources are available to them right now. Okay, second question. And I just want to go over here and say, hi, Gina. Who is with Gina and says it's just like, it really is exhausting. So I just want to acknowledge that it is exhausting. And that's where I talked about last week. I think it was last week where I was talking about the boundaries. And maybe that's when we ask ourselves, do I want to be doing this? And when you think about it, when I was growing up, my mother could never see my grades until the report card came home. Hallelujah. I mean, she was off doing her own thing and not worrying about it. And same with my husband. He looked at his grades and he was like, oh my gosh, my grades were horrible. And we didn't know. We know everything now. And I think we know too much. So if it's exhausting to check the grades, I say, just don't even do it. Like think about how do you take care of yourself so it's not so exhausting. So that's a really good question. So here's Julie's, and Julie writes me about chores. Okay, so who can relate to that? And I'll try to sit, if you're having trouble hearing me, I will try to sit a little closer. What if, this is what she asked, what if they huff and puff and complain about boundaries and doing laundry and helping out, etc.? I feel like I have to ask them several times a day, who's raising their hand. Can you fold the clothes that are in the dryer? Can you walk the dog? It's not like they say, sure, no problem, mom. Oh my goodness. Who relates to this one? Or you relate to the remind, it's constantly reminding them. You know what? We have to, this is where we have to simultaneously hold expectations and at the same time decrease our expectations. So what do I mean about that? Okay, well, first of all, this is so common. I mean, just all the time. I think Jen, who's the COO here at Moms of Tweens and Teens, we did a workshop on that. I can put it in the comments. We've written multiple blog posts about it because this is such a big issue. How do you get your kids to contribute and help around the house? It's not easy. So here are a couple of thoughts around this, okay? You have to ask yourself what's going to work. Chore charts for me, didn't work. Came home with them, had all this intention when my kids were little. Doesn't work for me. I'm not one that systems have ever come really easily to. I'm always working on it, my work. I'm always working at in my own life, but that didn't work. And it didn't work for my family. So each family is unique. You're unique. You have to ask what's going to work for me. Okay. Now, this formula that I shared a little earlier on really works well. So you want it, and it really works well because it helps to create conversation rather than defensiveness and power struggles and fights. So you want to say what you're noticing. Pick a good time. Maybe it's a dinner and dinner's not always a great time to bring up difficult conversations because then they want to leave the table. So maybe that's not the best time. So maybe it's just sometime when you're talking or you talk to each of your kids, but here's what I'm noticing. I'm noticing that I'm reminding you guys a lot. I'm nagging a lot. I want the family to help out and contribute more, but it's not going so well. So here's what I want. So you define what the issue is. Then you say what you want. I want us all in this family to contribute. And then you can share what you don't want. I don't want to be nagging. I don't want to be lecturing all the time. I don't want to be piling. My kids would say to me, you're piling on. Like they would do one chore and then I'd pile on another because I get kind of excited, like, oh my goodness, they're like helping me. So then I'd add another one and another one, and they would be like, whoa, you're piling on. So what worked in my family is I wrote a list, and I had a list of what they were to do. And that worked really well to write it down. We have another blog post that really works well, and that's using sticky notes. And so Jen, who's a systems person, actually has like a whiteboard. I have one over here that's for my schedule, but her whiteboard, she has do and done. And you can have sticky notes that are different colors for each of your kids. And so this is what they're to do, and then they can move it over in the done. So figuring out, might that work for you? And then putting things down on sticky notes. That has been very successful with the moms. But you want to ask them what their thoughts are. What are maybe some of the chores they like? What I find does not work is when we're just saying, walk the dog, do this, do that, and they're caught up in the moment with something else. I think it's important to be proactive and to think about what is gonna work for you, what's gonna work for me, and what are some realistic expectations with each of your kids' schedules. So find a system. So don't pile on. Find a system that works. Start small. Try different things. Okay, so sticky. Now, what worked for my family? Saturday morning clean. You got to clean your room every Saturday morning before you go do anything else. So that worked great. And what else worked really well is kids are really time challenged. I don't know if they've always been time challenged or if it's more because of social media and they don't track time well, but set a timer. Like my daughter, I remember she didn't want to do things because she thought it was going to take too long. And I said, well, let's time it. Let's set the stopwatch and see how long it takes. So she did the dishes. It took her less than 5 minutes. And she's like, wow. And I'm like, yeah. And so once she realized it didn't take her that long, she was more willing to do it. Our kids kind of sometimes think it's going to take all this time, right? And so setting the timer, maybe it's let's all clean the house for X amount of time and see what we can get done. So think about it. Then what will the consequence be if they don't help out? So maybe if they're not willing to do laundry and help out with the laundry, maybe they need to do their own laundry. And a natural consequence would be they end up having to wear, and I did this with my son, and it was really not fun, and kind of painful, sitting in the baseball stand and watching his game when he had white, dirty uniform pants on. It was hard because it's like, okay, I'm going to be judged as a bad mom whose kid is out there with their dirty pants. But one thing I didn't do a good job of, and now he's 28, and I just will confess this, is I could have helped him to develop a system where he could do that. And I really don't think that I did. I think I was too caught up and too many things going on. But like, okay, when your game's over, throw your pants in the laundry, put them in the washing machine, and put this in there with them so you can get them cleaned up. So sometimes what our kids need is they need a little guidance on how to do it, and we just want to say do it, but they need us to come alongside of them and actually teach them how to do that or coach them how to do that. Okay. If their chores aren't done, then they don't get to use the car until whatever they're supposed to do gets done. So think of creative ways and talk to them about that. You want to set them up and yourself up for success. So those are some, and expect them to hem and haw. Don't always expect them to have a great attitude. I think that's where we get caught up, and then we get mad at their attitude, and then we criticize them for their attitude, and then we get into a fight with them, and then we get into that power struggle, and it's not pleasant. Think about, what battles do I really want to fight here? And one of the battles I decided I did not want to fight is constantly being on my kids about their room. Some of you, that may be fine with you and you may be okay with that. It may work. But for me, I decided it wasn't worth the battle, and I shut the door. All my kids are really clean and neat now. All of them. I mean, my son does that folding a certain way where it's like I don't know who, if it was Maria Kondo or whatever her name is or whatever, but he folds his things a certain way. Both my daughters are super neat. So don't think they're going to be slobs for the rest of their lives just because right now their rooms are messy. It's part of it is age appropriate. And so, one time a week cleaning the room might be good before you take them to the mall or you go do something fun, and then have more fun. And maybe play music, when they're cleaning. Do make it fun and not heavy and a burden, and maybe you just want to start small. Okay, I'm going to come back here. So, okay, good, Lynn. You can hear okay. Yeah, better. Good. Okay, good. Lynn, my daughter does not just seem to care if her clothes are dirty. Well, who else can relate to that? And that's a whole nother thing, right? Because then it's like, oh man, they're just wearing dirty clothes and they don't care. And then what's wrong with that, right? What's wrong that my kid doesn't care about this? And that's a whole nother one, Lynn, so that we could talk about. So we have to think, okay, when does it matter? When doesn't it matter? How much of this is not really important in the big scheme of things? When do I, how do I support them in this? What can I let go of? What can't I? Is this maybe more about me and my image managing than my kid? Which those of you on here that know me, I talk a lot about my recovering image manager self, where my kid was wearing sweatpants and sweatshirts to school every day, and their hair is like this, and it was my deal. And I had tried and tried, and finally I was like, I just gotta let this one go. Gotta let this go. It was just contention, it was causing power struggles and not going anywhere good. And so I let go of it, and you know what? It just worked itself out. And that changed, and all of a sudden she wasn't wearing sweatpants anymore, and she was caring, and that was awesome. But we have to kind of think, is this more about me and what people might think of me? And is this supportive, or is this causing more stress in my relationship? So those are all good questions to ask. Okay, this is my third one, and I have about 10 minutes more, and then I have to get off. Vaping. Vaping. I got a question about vaping. It's huge. It's really a big deal now. Teens are vaping. So I'm going to read you this mom's question. Well, she reached out and she said, I just caught my daughter with a vape. She's a teenager, and I don't know how to handle it. She says it's her friends, and I really don't think that's the truth. So what do I do? And who's heard the it's my friends? It's kind of like my dog ate my homework. Now, sometimes it might be the friends, right? So I'm not saying that that it's not, but chances are sometimes we often hear that when it is. But regardless, if it's their friend's vape, they're being exposed to vaping. And I was trying to find some statistics for you. So I just want to share just briefly a little bit of facts about vaping, and then I'll go into what you can do about vaping, okay? They are the most commonly used tobacco product among teens. About 10% of middle schoolers are vaping, and 25% of high schoolers are vaping. Now, I don't know when that study was done, but they said the numbers are growing at an alarming rate. Vaping is marketed as being harmless to young people, but it's not. Most vapes contain addictive nicotine plus more than 30 harmful chemicals. So that's what's really concerning about vaping, is it has other chemicals in it that are harmful, and even dangerous heavy metals. And then the vape makers, they add flavorings to vape pods to make them more appealing. So I was actually with my daughter, who's 21, and she smelled something. I can't remember what it was. It might have been like a hair product I had on, and she said, it smells like pineapple vape, something like that. She said, it actually smells like a vape pod. And I was like, oh my gosh, like a pineapple vape pod, like they make all these different flavors. Nicotine is very addictive, and it can harm the adolescent brain development, especially the parts of brain that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control. That's the prefrontal cortex. And even though the term vapor is used, vapes do not produce water vapor. They produce an aerosol mist that contains ultrafine particles that are breathed into the lungs. These particles can damage the lungs and make more vulnerable to illness, including coronavirus. Okay. And they're designed to look, many of them, like a USB flash drive, and they can be easily hidden. And many of us know, you see somebody like this, and now my daughter will be like, oh, they're vaping over there. And I'm like, what? And I can't even see it. But now I've gotten pretty skilled. They go like this, and they're vaping. So if they're in high school, there's a pretty good chance that they have tried vaping, or that they know someone who vapes, or they might be vaping. Now, here's what you do if you find out that your kid is vaping, because I'm going to focus more on the mom that submitted this question. So the first thing is to stay calm, because as I read those statistics, I know that I feel anxious, and and we can panic. And so we want to stay calm. And if you're feeling angry when you find it right away, as easy as it is in that moment to react, try as hard as you possibly can to not do that. To say, and if they're with you, to say, we're going to talk about this and find a better time, because you know what? It never goes well when we talk about things with our kids in the heat of the moment. So talk to a friend that's a safe person. Reach out. That's why I love our inner circle, our membership group, because you can post in there and you can share and talk to other moms about what's causing the upset, and you can get it out, because we need to talk about it. And then when we can talk about it, we get grounded, then we can actually talk to them or go out and take a walk, whatever can, where you can take an exercise class, whatever helps to relieve a lot of that upset. So you're not taking it out on your kid, okay? Because that's not going to be helpful. And then you want to start the conversation by, again, this is where we can say, okay, get curious. How do I get curious? I ask questions, because here's the deal. At this age, our kids want to belong and they want to fit in, and they're trying to figure out how to do that. And if their friends are vaping, that's one of the ways they go along, because they want to belong. They want to fit in. They're curious. Their brain development, their prefrontal cortex is not totally developed. So they're more impulsive. They don't connect the cause and effect. So they're vaping. It's fun. Their friends are doing it. It makes them feel good. They're enjoying it. It tastes good. They like it, right? That's their perspective. They're not thinking about how they're damaging their lungs. They're not thinking about all the consequences of it. And so just remind yourself about where they are developmentally in order to coach yourself through it. And then you can be curious, okay? All right, so experts recommend that these are some of the questions that you can do, that you can ask, okay? What led you to try vaping? They say, why are you vaping? But I always think that why is a word that conveys judgment. So what led you to try vaping? How does vaping make you feel? You're not probably going to like, this is going to be hard. This is where we go, where we need the cowboy rawhide, like they're digging out a bullet, and how they bite down on that in the movie. And I always feel like that's how it feels. It's like so hard not to say something. But we want to be that safe place. We want to be that non-judgmental place where our kids really can talk to us and open up and share. Why? Because when we can do that, our kids are just going to make better choices. They're not going to be rebelling as much. So under everything, at the foundation of everything that we do, we want to think about how can we be more relational and more of a safe place for our kids to open up and talk to us. That's the biggest question, because when we can do that, a lot of these things, our kids, we're helping them to process and to reason and to make good choices. And the foundation of that is to be supportive and loving and warm and encouraging rather than judgmental, critical. And a lot of times when we get judgmental and critical, it's because we're feeling fear. And the truth is, we do feel fear, and it's totally and completely understandable. But when we're coming at it with that energy, it's not going to go very well. So just keep on thinking, bring it into this moment, bring it into this moment. Just be here and now in this moment. What's in the vapes you use? Tell me about it. Tell me about, what do you think the dangers are? Have you heard of any dangers? But try not to interrupt and lecture, okay? Then you just want to tell them that their health is the most important thing to you. And as a parent, it's your job to help them and to support them to make good choices about their health and to keep them safe. And this is a safety health issue. So we're not talking about, we're talking about safety and health here. So when we're talking about safety and health here, that looks a little bit different. We're not going to let our kids have the keys to the car if they don't know how to, if they're not driving responsibly. What are we going to do? We're going to address that. We're going to deal with them because we want them to be safe. So it's the same thing with this. And then we want to, one of the things that can be really helpful is to share, not scare. So if you know a story, sometimes they've been posted, and maybe we've even posted them, about a kid that was vaping and a lung collapsed, share, hey, I read in the news, this is what's happening. This is how it impacts you. Have you ever thought about that? I know that you're at that age where you think, not me. So that's validating where they're at. I know you want to, your friends are doing it. That's really difficult when all your friends are doing it. You kind of like it, right? It's understandable. Think about when you were that age. What were some of the things that you were doing that weren't good for you? Then you want to take it away. So you want to say, vaping's not allowed, it's not okay, and you want to take it. And you want to take the pod, you want to take the vape, and get rid of it. And then you want to discuss consequences with them. And I was talking to my 21-year-old who actually has friends that vape. And I said, what do you think, some consequences should be? And she said, get rid of them, take it, get rid of it. And, grounding, taking away video games, that's usually not going to be very helpful. That's not going to be a deterrent to what they're going to do. But one that I love is have them research it, and they have to tell you what some of the findings were with vaping. Maybe before they use the car or before they go somewhere, they need to tell you some of the negative effects of vaping that they find out. So that might be one that might work. Also, are you giving them money? How are they buying the vapes? So maybe it's, you know what, we're not going to give you the spending money about vaping. Then you want to talk about what they can do to avoid vaping. Now, they may not listen to you. I just want you to know that. They may continue to try to vape and to continue to have these conversations. Continue to focus on your relationship with your kid. Continue to talk about this with them in a non-judgmental way. Express your concern, express your care, and continue to set those boundaries and limits that vaping is not allowed. It's not okay. Have a no tolerance policy. And then what can you do to avoid vaping? And there's a lot online, that a lot of resources that you can find if you Google it, but you want to brainstorm with them, maybe chewing gum, maybe ideas what to say to friends that are vaping. What are some of those things that they can do? And even role play, but ask them, don't tell them. What might you do if your friends are vaping so that you're not tempted to vape? And be in the conversation. And then most of all, and I'll end on this, is we have to create a trustworthy environment where our kids feel safe to open up and talk about the difficult topics with us. Again, without judgment, without criticism, with us really just trying to come alongside of them and be in this process with them. It's hard, it's not easy, but I know that we can do it. And then focus on positive ways to build your kid up, to affirm them, to look for the things that they are doing. Because it's really easy if you've got a kid that's getting into some trouble, that's vaping, that's making some of these choices, to get really bogged down in the fear and the negative. And so think about ways that you can actually connect with them. Maybe it's just going through a Starbucks drive-through, maybe it's, just being with them when they're playing a video game for 10 minutes, having them tell you about their video game. Just think of creative ways that you can find that connection. Buying them their favorite, acts of kindness, buying them their favorite food, or making their favorite meal, ways that you can connect and show them that you care. So anyway, thank you for being here, for listening, for joining. I'll be back next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central. So submit message me. Actually, emailing me at cheryl@momsoftweensandteens.com is the best way. Tell me you watched the live and that you have a question for next week, and I would be more than happy to answer it for you. Okay, love connecting with you here, and so happy that you're here and that you're listening. Okay, have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. See you next week.